into Act 3, Scene 7, and we're on page 43 of our Paper 2 notes book. Wow. If you read this scene and it didn't impact upon you, I'd be surprised. I hope by the time this video, which will be a little bit longer than some of the other videos that explain what happens in the scenes, by the time this video is over, you're going to have a sense of why it's so important. I've said to you before that there are 3 really important scenes in this play, more than any other scene. Act 1, Scene 1, the exposition, which sets the ball rolling for the drama. Act 3, Scene 5, Act 5, Scene 3, apologies, which is the resolution, where all the different plot strands tie together, come to an end, and we find out what happens to all of the characters. And Act 2, Scene 4, the climax scene, where Lear's confrontation with and humiliation by Goneril and Regan leads to, his madness and his experience in the storm, which has such a transformative effect on him. But this scene has to compete with those 3 for the title of most important scene in the play. Lear doesn't appear in the scene, but everywhere in the scene we have the context of his abdication, the context of his irresponsible decision at the start of the play to abdicate and divide power, the consequences of his hubris for the nation. The scene is, and again, I'm not reading this, I've highlighted a few things for you. It is truly violent and very shocking. It is the scene in which Cornwall brings Gloucester before him, and Edmund is told to leave because Cornwall tells him, he won't want to be around to witness the punishment that Edmund is going that Cornwall is going to administer to Gloucester for the terrible crime of helping the king. Gloucester is brave in the scene and defiant, and tells Cornwall that he doesn't regret what he's done. And Cornwall's response is inhuman and barbaric. I'm going to show you that in a second. But what's really, and we know what happens, he gouges out Gloucester's eye. But for me, what really is important in this scene, there's 2 things that really matter more than anything else in this scene. First of all, the terrible violence that is delivered onto Gloucester by Cornwall and by Regan, working together, is just proof of Lear's failure as a king. The only reason that Cornwall can do what he does, the only reason that Regan can do what she does, is because Lear gave her and him as her husband the power to act with royal authority. And these 2 people are palpably unsuited for that great power. They abuse it terribly, and that is a reflection not only on their own character, but on the character of Lear, who gave them this authority in exchange for a few words of flattery. The other important thing is, of course, the involvement of Cornwall's servant. Cornwall's servant is a really important symbol in the play, who intervenes to try and stop the torture of Gloucester. And the important thing is that in no way whatsoever can Cornwall's servant benefit from the intervention. The only thing that would benefit him is to keep his mouth shut. But there's a moral line between what is acceptable and when you just have to stand up and say, no, that's wrong. And Cornwall's servant does that and sacrifices himself. He's of course killed by Regan, having fought with and fatally wounded Cornwall. Cornwall's servant becomes another important symbol of humanity's capacity for decency and honour in a world, in this play, which is often very bleak, and in a play which contains very pessimistic, often, depictions of human behaviour, not least in this scene. So let's have a look at the quotes. The vicious cruelty of Goneril and Regan, these 2 women who Lear granted royal authority, to whom Lear granted royal authority, is evident in their demand at the start of the scene when Gloucester's brought in with his corky arms bound. Hang him instantly, pluck out his eyes. These are These are the arbiters of justice in the kingdom. Lear has given them royal power and authority. This is not a democracy. They have power, and this is how they treat people who they regard as being defiant. You know, they are our perception of them at the start of the play is, you know, women put in an invidious position, you know, relatable, understand why they behave the way they behave. That's all gone now. They're now like, they've become this kind of almost caricature of wicked intent. They are representative now of nothing but human corruption. Gloucester, Cornwall warns Edmund, keep you our sister. When he says sister, he means sister-in-law. That's Goneril, his wife's sister. Some company. The revenges we are bound to take upon your traitorous father are not fit for your beholding. So he's saying, Edmund, you go with Goneril because you don't want to see what I'm going to do to your dad. I'm going to really mess him up. Now again, you'd hope that Edmund, because we kind of like Edmund, we understood the resentment of being treated as a bastard, being called a whoreson, and we admire his determination and his ability to, you know, use his skills, you know, to make his life better. And while he is immoral and corrupt, there's something in him up to this point in the play which makes us go, well, yeah, but we still like him. But here he just doesn't say a word, he just leaves. There's not even a farewell to his father. So that action, that act of leaving, knowing the terrible fate that awaits his father, without any attempt to try to mitigate that fate again, that's a serious mark in the debit column against him. We start to change our perception of him as well. So many characters in this play go through great change in terms of how we perceive them. Edmund does here. One of those characters is Gloucester. When he says, I am tied at the stake and must stand the course, it's a wonderful little play by Shakespeare, because of course Gloucester at the start of the play demanded that his son Edgar be brought to the stake. So Gloucester shows nobility here. He says, look, I first of all, he pretends he's innocent. Then he says, okay, look, whatever. I know what I did, and I'm happy that I did the right thing. So, you know, you do your worst. You know, whatever's coming, bring it on, he says. And of course, that is a noble bravery that we admire in him. What he doesn't realise is how bad Cornwall and Regan can be. And of course, he tells Regan, to use, you know, a modern terminology, he tells Regan, look, I hope to live to see the day when you receive your just rewards, when you are punished. And of course, as soon as he says, I hope to live to see the day, that's when Cornwall, you know, says, you'll never see the day. And he reaches into his eye and pulls his eyeball out vile jelly. Where is thy lustre now? And of course, this is shocking to the audience, but also to Cornwall's servant. I'm actually going to just write down that little quote there. Sorry about my terrible handwriting. That's Cornwall. You know, out vile jelly. There's something about that line. There's something really, and he pulls the eyeball out and, you know, crushes the eyeball, and it's horrendously difficult to watch, and it's an intimate act of torture, reaching into his socket of his eye and pulling the eyeball out, and it shows the barbarism that Cornwall is capable of. But the servant steps forward and says, hold your hand, my lord. I have served you ever since I was a child, but better service have I never done you than now to bid you hold. And I love that quote so much, because do you know what it does? It gives me hope. I don't know whether I'd be brave enough to stand up for what's right. I've often thought about this. I've often thought about living in societies where terrible things were done, and where to stand up for what's right is like volunteering for your own pain. And it takes a certain, you know, nobility, strength, bravery, extraordinary sense of self-sacrifice to do that. And they're people that we call heroes. Martin Luther King, Mohandas Gandhi, you know, the White Flower movement and the White Rose movement in Munich during the Second World War. And Gloucester's Cornwall's servant fits that category. He can do nothing. Helping Gloucester here will do nothing for him. He can't benefit in any way, but it's the right thing to do, and he stands up against this act of barbarism. Anyway, the other thing to note in this scene is when Regan, when Cornwall calls out for Edmund to help him, Regan tells him, "Thou calls on him that hates thee. It was him that made the overture of thy treasons to us." And of course, this is the moment, and there's a huge irony there, the moment that Gloucester is physically blinded. He sees the truth of Edmund's character. He understands that Edmund is the traitor, and therefore, and he laments Edgar, the food of thy dear father's wrath, he says in the same. Then he realizes, oh my God, if Edmund is a traitor, Edgar must have been innocent. What have I done? And in that moment, when he physically loses the ability to see, because the other eye is gouged out, he, in a metaphorical sense, learns to see the truth of his two sons. And the pain that he feels, the physical pain that he feels, like Lear, is offset by the immense psychological and emotional pain he feels at the thought that he has done such a terrible thing to his innocent son Edgar. It's a very, very, very important scene.